the craziest week ever. And
this is the craziest week ever.
It's only going to get, like, I presume each successive week until the end of the season is going to get crazier, right?
Yeah. How many weeks will it be? How will we handle this week? We've got Jason Wood, Dr. Jene Bramel. Hey, everybody out there. It's week 12. And I was thinking of Spaceballs this morning, guys. Ludicrous speed. So we go in here, and Gene, I know that whenever you were in medical school, this was exactly what you were envisioning using your degree for. But these kinds of calls are the calls we have to make because it's fantasy football during a pandemic. What do you do with your Baltimore? Well, what Baltimore and Pittsburgh players are left for the potential game Tuesday night?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a lot of great guidance for you. I think this. I think the NFL remains confident that they can play the game on Tuesday night based on what they know of when the exposures likely happened, when Baltimore shut down their facility, when they stopped getting together in large numbers across positions. The fact that players continue to test positive is within the realm of the incubation period. But if the outbreak occurred theoretically Saturday, Sunday, Monday of last week, they haven't been together in the facility since Wednesday night at the latest, then 5 days, which is what they've been assuming where players are going to test positive with the daily tests, would be up in time for them to play on Tuesday. And they clearly want as many games played within the weekly window as possible. And since this is the last one that's of concern this week, to get it played on Tuesday means they can close the books on week 12. But they're doing it within COVID protocols, what they believe to be safe. They're not anticipating putting a known ongoing outbreak on the field on Tuesday night. Now, that being said, we know that in past weeks there have been players that have tested positive on Sunday, and the test results haven't been reported until after the games. But if today's Baltimore and Pittsburgh tests are negative, and there aren't any additional positives through the week connected to the previous outbreak, the contact tracing that they've done, then I think they're going to try to play the game. I don't have a great sense of how likely that is, knowing that there were a couple of positives yesterday. But the NFL has information about contact tracing within those teams that we do not. If they think that it's safe to play and that there's not going to be a contagious person on the field to the best of their knowledge on Tuesday night, then I think the game is going to go on. I think we're going to have a better answer to that question later today after we know what the Sunday test results are and how the NFL responds to those than not. But I don't want to put a percentage on it. I don't think it's 50-50 necessarily. Everything has been consistent from the NFL that this game is going to be played from Thursday forward, and nothing has really changed. So barring something unexpected, I think you're going to see the game go. Hopefully you've got some sort of hedges in place in case something changes, but it's a really difficult decision to make. You're not going to have enough information right now. I think, again, what we know is that the NFL wants to play the game, and that's probably what we should work towards, knowing that it's definitely possible that something changes on Monday after it's too late to make any difference for your lineups.
And folks, if you aren't following the news this morning, Mark Andrews and Matt Judon testing positive and go on the COVID list for the Ravens. Really quick, Gene, before I'll toss this to you, Jason, we'll get to some fantasy football implications. What do you think the NFL defines as an outbreak? I mean, just consecutive days with positive tests? Is it? I know they have access to contact tracing, but at this point, I'm just trying to figure out from the outside looking in, what is going to be, because Will Carroll, the esteemed Will Carroll, who is, was a trailblazer in a lot of this injury medical side, he said it just looks like there's nothing that's going to make the NFL postpone a game at this point. What do you think would make the NFL postpone a game?
I think evidence of ongoing transmission that could put a player on the field that there would be reason to believe could be contagious. So I think that's what they're doing today. Jason La-Canfora said kind of what I've been saying for the last couple of days, which is that the NFL has information by contact tracing that the players that they knew were high-risk close contacts have been testing and probably testing positive as we go. And those players haven't been around each other since Wednesday, and they really haven't been doing team practices since Monday's walkthrough.
Right.
So, we know that the incubation period is wide, and maybe there's a spare person or so that would test positive 7 to 8 to 10 days after exposure, known exposure. But if they are tracing those players that they felt were high-risk contacts, the difficulty with that is if they were deemed to be high-risk close contacts, they probably would have been on the COVID list 5 days ago, right? Because that they would have had to been out for 5 days.
Right.
So that's the difficulty with this. But based on the way and what happened in Denver, where their contract tracing was subverted by players and coaching staffs and what have you. So, but that's what they're going on. So I don't know how to define outbreak necessarily. Multiple players testing positive over multiple days with a known with known connections is how I would assume that they're defining outbreak. But there's issues with this. They're trying to balance finishing weeks, finishing games, finishing season with keeping their players as safe as possible. And they decided to play outside of a bubble during a pandemic, during respiratory season. So we can make arguments about player safety, and we can continue this discussion if you like. But the NFL and the NFLPA has agreed to play under these parameters, and they continue to adjust protocols week by week to try to keep as many players safe as possible. But when you're dealing with 100 plus persons per team, no bubble outside the facility, community spread in lots of different areas, a virus that is contagious asymptomatically, these are known issues. And they're hour by hour, day by day, doing what they feel like is best.
Yeah, here's the connection. They look on the sidelines during the game. They're all connected, whether the NFL protocol says that or not. But like you said, Gene, I mean, basically this is football, professional football during a pandemic, and we've got fantasy football during a pandemic. Jason, do you have any Pittsburgh or Baltimore decisions to make? I know a lot of leagues have instituted the plan that you can designate someone and say, I'm playing Deontay Johnson, but if he doesn't go, then give me Tyler Boyd or what have you. That aside, do you have any that you're basically just making that run where you have to decide I'll either take a 0 or get what I'm getting from my Tuesday night Steeler or Raven?
I mean, as you said, Sig, in the leagues that I'm a commissioner of, after the early season Tennessee stuff, we put in that exact plan that you just articulated, right? Which is you can do the kind of the conditional swap, like I'm going to play Deontay Johnson, but if the game doesn't happen, then I'll play Cole Beasley. I don't really have any specific issues that I guess others aren't facing. I mean, I have Mark Andrews on a few teams, but I wasn't super high on Andrews this year at his ADP, so I've kind of dodged that bullet. I have Lamar Jackson on a few teams, but I have to be honest. I mean, he hasn't been good enough that I don't already have alternatives on rosters.
Right.
No, I think it's probably more affecting people on the Steelers side, is my guess. I mean, I have Deontay Johnson on a lot of teams, so that's painful. And in a few of those leagues, I'm not the commissioner, so I don't have this conditional option, and I'm just not. I mean, I'm treating it in as much as possible. It's just that the game's not happening, and I kind of made that decision yesterday. I realize a lot of our listeners or watchers don't have that luxury, in which case, it is very much calculus, right? It kind of comes down to, you should have a good sense by now with most leagues ending their regular season in weeks 13 or 14 of where you are from a playoff positioning. And it's game theory, right? I mean, depending on the size of your roster and the waiver options, you have to kind of say, am I willing to risk a 0 because I need to win this week and I have nothing that's going to come close to doing what a Deontay Johnson would do, or I mean, I guess he and Juju and Claypool are really the only ones that you'd have to make that decision.
Maybe Ebron, because the Steelers backfield.
I mean, because I was thinking about the Ravens, right? Like,
I
know a lot of people were big on Gus Edwards because we knew for a while now that Ingram and Dobbins were out. But I mean, at this point, would you feel great about starting Gus Edwards on Tuesday? As he doesn't fit into the category of like, I have to play him or bust. In fact, I have, as you know, I have three kids, and my 15-year-old is hella into fantasy, and he has Andrews and Edwards. So, he dropped Edwards for Mike Gesicki, right? Because, I mean, and let's be clear. I mean, those people who tested positive, like Andrews and Connor and Lamar, are going to miss multiple weeks for sure. Like, we don't know about this game, and we don't know about next week in terms of whether these teams will be able to play a game. But we do know that those players, particularly Andrews, who just was tested positive, will miss this week and next week. So you need to plan accordingly, right? I mean, chances are, even though Andrews has been inconsistent, he is, if you have him, likely your starter. So you're going to need to not only swap him for this week, but you should look to who else has a favorable matchup next week if he can as well. So it's tricky. I mean, we were joking off air before we went live. I mean, this has probably been doing this for about 20 years now, at least in terms of a quasi-professional nature where I'm sharing my thoughts or advice with others. And I don't think we've ever seen anything like this. And just getting back to what you and Gene were talking about, I mean, I think this is endemic of the situation where it's not going to get better, right? I mean, and I'm not trying to be Chicken Little. I'm just saying that the reason that they're making these Herculean efforts to keep these games played is because time is running out on the season. And it stands to reason that this kind of thing is going to happen in week 13 and 14. And the calculus needed to push those games off is going to get even more difficult. So I think their hope is let's just try and get these games in and let the chips fall where they may. I don't remember who it was, but one of the talking heads this week made a great point, which I hadn't thought of, which is that I know there was some talk earlier in the season about a week 18. And one of the reasons that this Baltimore-Pittsburgh game didn't become eligible for that is because Pittsburgh's undefeated. If they push this game to week 18, Pittsburgh's going to just forfeit the game, as they should, right? Because they're going to say, why risk injury or COVID when we're about to have the number one seed in the playoffs? So, it's going to be difficult. And for fantasy, we all, as we know, we kind of grind until we try and put our teams in the best position for the fantasy playoffs, which week 13 through 16. And it's likely going to be the hardest set of decisions we're going to make because we're going to be in the midst of this COVID outbreak. So it's going to be tricky, and that's why we're here.
Yeah, we're going to do our best. Yep. And I think that going back to the bottom line advice, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster, Eric Ebron, because tight end's rough out there, and the Steelers defense. Let's not forget. Sorry, Gene.
Oh, that's true.
Team defenses. Sorry. You can cover your ears for that part. Those are the plays that are compelling enough to say that you risk the zero. If we say there's a 30% chance they're going to play the game, then 30%, you do the math, like 30% of Deontay Johnson's expected 16 points in PPR. Do you have an option that you feel certain is going to get you, 8 points in place of them? And judging by the state of some of these offenses, it might not be that easy to find these reliable options. And I think that if there's like what Gene was saying, I mean, even if we have another positive for the Ravens tomorrow, if Tuesday morning there's no positives, I think they're going to play the game. So this gives you some hope, I guess. That's a strange use of hope, that the game will be played, because the Ravens offense just looks totally bereft of any value. I think Andrews was the last guy that was a tough call with RG3 starting. Des Bryant, did you have Robert Griffin III will complete a pass to Des Bryant on your 2020 bingo card? Because that's where we are. But Gene, we're also maybe going to get to see Austin Ekeler. I mean, we are going to see Austin Ekeler, but maybe see Austin Ekeler in a fantasy relevant role. What's your forecast? I know Ian Rappaport said not the bell cow, but Kalen Ballage unlikely to play. What do we do with Ekeler today?
Well, in the last 48 hours, I've changed my tune significantly on Ekeler. I was anticipating that he was going to need a week of individual drills to get back into condition to be cleared to play. But he's convinced the coaching staff he's good to go. Justin Jackson is out. Kalen Ballage sounds like he's going to be out with ankle and calf injuries today, which leaves Josh Kelly and Troymaine Pope as the only options behind Ekeler. And you can see a scenario in which this game stays close. Ekeler seems healthy and he's productive, and then all of a sudden he's getting 15 to 18 touches and he's RB1 today. You could also see a scenario in which Buffalo gets out to a big lead, even though Ekeler is probably their best pass catching back. Maybe they decide, we just don't want to risk this after all today. We just don't know exactly how healthy he is. They felt good enough about him on Thursday to have him do more on Friday. Felt good enough, actually the other way around, Wednesday to do more on Thursday. They traveled on Friday, did a walkthrough on Saturday, and things seemed like they were going well, and he was activated on Saturday. So I think there's every reason to believe that you can get 10 touches out of Ekeler today, regardless of what the game script is. I don't know that, bell cow, no. I don't think we're getting 20 touches where he's going to play 80% of the snaps this week, but I think he's going to get pretty good usage while he's there, and I don't know that those other two players are going to be competitive enough to keep him off the field if he looks close enough to be healthy at all. So if you have Ekeler, I don't have any qualms with using him at this point. There is some risk there of aggravation than a game script issue, but certainly looks like he's going to get a ton more touches than what we had anticipated on Wednesday or Thursday, when it didn't even look like he might play this week.
So this Chargers-Bills game, this is the high entertainment value game of the day, Jason. For fantasy, again, I mean, in some ways, all this craziness in fantasy football makes a lot of these decisions easy. Like you're going to be playing Mike Williams probably if you have him. On the Buffalo side, John Brown on IR now. That makes Cole Beasley an easier play. Casey Hayward is out. Melvin Ingram is out. He's on IR. So, we'll see about the Josh Allen with and without John Brown, but you would expect the Bills offense to function well. What about Ekeler, though? Are you more inclined to tell people, yeah, go for it, or say if you even have, because we're looking at options, Jason, like Brian Hill or Giovanni Bernard. I won't say Frank Gore. I love Frank Gore, but we have some players that you feel more confident that to get more touches than Ekeler, but are they better plays than Ekeler?
No, I don't think so. I think I'm with Gene. Ekeler was out for a long time. You likely held on to, if you did hold on to him, or had an IR spot. We're in the crunch time, as we've been saying for the last 20 minutes. There's a lot of difficult lineup decisions to be made. Probably people are just basically looking for warm bodies that they can craft a narrative that they can get 8 to 10 points as a floor. I think Ekeler fits into that, as we've already talked about. I mean, there aren't enough alternative assets that are going to be on the field for the Chargers against the Bills that I can't see him, while he's on the field, being a key component. So I feel pretty good about Ekeler. I mean, he's in my top 15 this week for sure, and I wouldn't be surprised if, and likely coming down to whether he scores a touchdown, he outperforms that. So I can't imagine any of the names that you mentioned to say I would start Ekeler over for sure.
We can get a few of those other names as we talk about some of the other situations going on. Gene, no Christian McCaffrey this week. He actually went from questionable but pessimistic to out. How confident are you that we'll see him in week 14?
Pretty confident. I think he was probably close enough, but not too much reason for Carolina to risk him today. Mike Davis is still available for them, so we should see him back, I would expect, this week or the following week after the bye, yeah.
So what about that one, Woodrow, and just your general level of confidence in Mike Davis today in the Teddy returns to Minnesota game?
I mean, there was this little blip where it seemed like Mike Davis was kind of falling off of being a fantasy savior those last few weeks, and then McCaffrey came back. But, I think Davis, certainly from a fantasy perspective, performed, last week as well. So yeah. I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine with him.
What if you had to choose between Davis and Ekeler?
That's a good one. I would go with Ekeler. But it's close. I mean, they're kind of in the same ballpark. Like I would go with both of them. I would go with Wayne Gallman over both of them, for example. Mm-hmm. Just because on paper the Bengals matchup is one of the few what I would call great rushing matchups this week, right? So I never thought I'd see the day where I'd be saying I prefer Wayne Gallman over Austin Ekeler, but 2020, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to think about it too. Is with Gallman, he scored in 4 straight games going into the bye. You would think the Giants should be able to control this game against Brandon Allen in Cincinnati. And while we're on that topic, Gene, and again, I think this is a lower tier running back too, but you might be relying on Giovanni Bernard. Can we rely on him to take the field today?
Yes. There hadn't been any indication that he wasn't cleared by the independent neurologist on Friday afternoon or Saturday. He should be good to go.
Let's turn the page to yet another one of these running backs. Raheem Mostert, Gene. It's not a question of whether he's going to play, but kind of like the Austin Ekeler question, roughly what's the range of touches and risk of re-injury for this one?
I think Mostert should be okay. Coming out of the bye, this was always their expectation that he was going to be available this week. The MCL injury is different than, say, a different soft tissue injury where there's a muscle strain or something like that where you're not exactly sure where things are unless you see him fully practice. If the knee is stable and because they've cleared him to practice and returning him to play, you would expect that it is. It's not a high risk of re-injury. And unlike Chris Carson coming back from a foot injury, the analogy I made today was that, he's got to deal with, Carson's got to deal with Hyde and some other issues coming back with the soft tissue. This is not really an injury that you would expect has a high risk of aggravation, and the depth chart around Raheem Mostert isn't as competitive necessarily as it would be. Now, Kyle Shanahan's going to use hot hand. We're going to see some Jerick McKinnon, but I think Mostert's got a good chance of getting 10 to 15 touches straight out of the gate.
Before I tee this one up for Jason, let's welcome Mitch Carl.
Good morning, gentlemen. Hey, how's everybody doing today?
Oh, we're doing what we do because the people won it, and we're happy to do it. Honestly, I'm happy that I can play a role this morning for folks, and we can try to navigate these waters. And I'll tee you up an overall DFS take, but first I want to get some closure on Raheem Mostert, Jason, because unlike Austin Ekeler, the exciting thing about playing Austin Ekeler is this Chargers offense. Remember back before the season when we thought the Chargers offense was going to be one of the most boring in the league, and now it's one of the most exciting in the league. The 49ers offense, I don't know what you would call it right now. They are going to get Trent Williams back. I mean, really, they're getting a lot of players back this week. So should we look at, because Ekeler and Mostert, these are fun plays. Like, if you just clear your mind and you look at your lineup, it's hard to not check Ekeler or Mostert based on what we know about them as players. What do you think? What advice for anybody with a Mostert decision today?
I'm reluctant, honestly, not because I think that he isn't going to be healthy and get an opportunity this week, as Gene alluded, but I mean, it's a terrible matchup. I mean, it's a bottom 5 matchup this week against the Rams. So I don't, unlike the Bills, which again, the Chargers, which I would call a neutral matchup, I don't understand. Like, I don't know why we should think that the 49ers are going to get untracked in a key divisional game against, I think, a Rams team that's much healthier and I think a better team pretty much in every facet. And that's including quarterback, which talk about the bloom off the rose with Garoppolo. Not to go on the side, but I mean, I think the 49ers have tough decisions to make, right? I mean, Garoppolo is basically, they can cut Garoppolo after the season, I think, by the end of April and just walk away. And I expect they'll do that unless he has some kind of miraculous end of season run. So I'm avoiding the 49ers to whatever extent it's entirely possible. I mean, Jeff Wilson's active this week, as I understand it as well. So, I mean, I think if I had to do a probability tree, I would say the most likely running back to lead the 49ers in yards and fantasy points this week is Mostert. But if I look at the box score, because I don't expect to be watching much of that game, and I see that Jeff Wilson will I be surprised? No, I won't be. So, I'm much less confident about plugging in Mostert than I am Ekeler for sure.
All right, Mitch, rise or fall. This is like it's funny that week 18 is something in the vernacular now, whether or not it happens, because we all know from our fantasy football histories that week 17 is the unpredictable week. Week 17 is the crazy week. Week 17 is the week that is the most difficult to prognosticate, hence no week 17 Super Bowls. But this feels like week 18. Like, we're going to be stuck in week 18 for the rest of the year, basically. But does that make DFS easier? Is this one of those things where don't complicate it, don't overthink it? There should be some glaringly clear, safe plays, and then you just like bricks with mortar. The mortar's just a few low priced guys. Take your pick from these guys, but really there's a shelter that you run to in the storm.
It's interesting that you say that, because I think for cash games, yes, absolutely 100%. I think there's been some injuries, there's some COVID things going on, stuff around the league where glaring value has popped up, and you should just play it in cash games. But outside of that, there's also a handful of spots where I'm looking at the entire field saying, wow, what a great play. I love this guy. And he's going to be really highly owned in tournaments. And then I look at the other players' price right up and down, right below them on both DraftKings and FanDuel. For instance, Justin Jefferson, and I wonder to myself, why am I playing this guy in a tournament when we're looking at a quarter of the field in these large tournaments having Justin Jefferson, when there's people like Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp and Calvin Ridley and A.J. Brown and Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, and the list goes on, and I can't stop myself right there in FanDuel. And on DraftKings, under, I believe, maybe $100 difference is Cooper Kupp at half the ownership projected right now through our model. And why am I playing Justin Jefferson over Cooper Kupp on DraftKings, a full point per reception site, and I can have Cooper Kupp at a half the ownership in a tournament? I mean, there's a long list of players today I'm looking at saying to myself, I can't do it. There's too many great options. So I think you got to be careful with some of the value that's opened up, some of these injuries, some of these issues on these teams where they're just going to be a little bit too chalky for me when there's phenomenal talents all over the map today. And if you're eating that chalk, you better hope that it goes bonkers, because you're going to be behind a large percentage of the field that said, no, thank you.
Yeah, I like how you differentiate between the cash games where you are playing it safe and the tournaments where you do need to go against the herd to have a chance. Let's run down some more of these injury situations that can be affecting those decisions, Gene. Julio Jones, we saw one game time decision, one he's not going to play. Which side of that do you fall on?
I think he's doubtful at best. You don't like to see Friday DNPs from Julio Jones. He didn't talk to the media all week. He's been a little bit harder to read this year than in past, but this is chronic hamstring soreness. Another aggravation is third within the regular season, and probably been more than that since the preseason. Just has never got healthy and really labored to get through after that. So I don't expect him to play. If he is active by some chance, you don't really expect him to get a ton of snaps or be effective.
After watching that fourth down play he got in last week, I just hope they let him sit. I mean, maybe not even for this week. Mitch, Atlanta and the Vegas Raiders, outside of Josh Jacobs, is there anybody that you're even kicking the tires on? Are you even kicking the tires on Jacobs with Falcons having a decent run defense?
Yeah, I actually like this game. Some really good spots here. First off, the Raiders. Shockingly, the Raiders are they have given up the second most touchdown runs on the entire season. So Brian Hill, it's hard for me to avoid him in cash games, 5.1K on FanDuel, and he's $4,000 minimum price on DraftKings. On the flip side, I love Nelson Aguilar for the Raiders. They're facing the Falcons, who are giving up 300 yards passing per game at the most on the main slate on both sites. And I think Nelson Aguilar, if he has potential here to hit that team total, which is quite healthy today, it's somebody's going to score. And if you're either investing in Derek Carr and Aguilar and Waller, go ahead. If you don't think that it's going to be the passing game, then you should probably be believing in Josh Jacobs. In one way or another, somebody's going to score some points against Atlanta. We have seen that defense start to turn the corner a little bit over the last 4 weeks, if you've been paying attention. A lot less yards given up, a few less points given up. I believe it's 24-point average, which in the first half of the season was over 30. So they're shoring up some holes, and I don't know if Deion Jones was injured and he's back or something. I don't know who was missing. I'm not an IDP guy, but Falcons must be getting healthier. They've changed something because their defense is better, but I still think it's a good spot. Aguilar for the Raiders is my favorite, and Brian Hill, love. It's hard not to like Calvin Ridley, and he's kind of one of those guys that's being overlooked because of game logs. Game log watchers, they love it, right? We're looking at targets being 7, 4, and 9 over the last 4 weeks, has not had over 90 yards, has only had a couple touchdowns. We've had 2 games this year where we've missed Julio Jones, and I totally believe what the doc has told us this morning about Julio Jones, and I would be hard-pressed to see Julio Jones play today. I think it would be hard-pressed for him to get in the lineup, truly. It does not look right. And we've seen 2 games this year without Julio Jones, where Ridley racked up 10 and 13 targets. He had 13 receptions for 246 yards in those games. Did not have a touchdown, but I think there's always an opportunity for somebody who's going to garner that many looks to have a nice big game.
And I didn't ask about Hayden Hurst, Gene, because when there's no Julio, there was no Hayden Hurst. He just does like a disappearing act. We'll see about the Atlanta offense and their disappearing act, and this one is the Raiders try to push for the playoffs. Gene, let's go another injury situation for tonight. Mitch, please. He's back, but I'm not going to ask about the Bears. I'm going to ask about Marquez Valdes-Scantling and how that could affect guys like Robert Tonyan, the Lazard King. Are we going to see? There were some reports, Gene, I want to say that he looked like he pulled up lame in practice and so on. Where do you have him as far as chances to play tonight?
Yeah, there hadn't been a lot of discussion about him through the weekend. I was kind of surprised. He did look like he had a little bit of trouble and wasn't comfortable on his left leg at all, already dealing with a little bit of something. And then this Achilles injury is what it was reported on top of it. Didn't return to practice on Friday. And we know what the Packers medical staff thinks about recent or unresolved soft tissue injuries like this. He was listed as questionable, which gives him a chance to play. Usually the Packers will not do that. But I'm skeptical that he's going to be able to go. That DNP on Friday looks pretty ominous, and I'll be surprised if he's on the active roster.
So in this game tonight, which we're talking Bears, Packers, in some ways it tests your reliability of matchups. Like David Montgomery's back. It's Packers run defense, but it's the Bears offense. It's the Bears offense with Mitchell Trubisky. How does that affect any number of plays there on the Packers side, as Gene just laid out? We have a narrower target tree. Anybody stand out in lights in the game played under the lights tonight?
Well, I understand the reluctance about being excited by David Montgomery, but if you look at my name today, right, it's like start him if you got him. So I'm okay with David Montgomery. Like I would feel better about David Montgomery because I think context is always key with these kind of situations. I feel better about David Montgomery than say Brian Hill or Jordan Wilkins or James White. That ilk. So yeah, I'm okay with that. I mean, as you said, on paper, good matchup, but it is the Bears. They don't really seem to have a quarterback because they have two bad ones. I wouldn't feel great. Like, I'm not thinking, oh man, thank goodness David Montgomery's back in my lineup. Like, Hosanna, I'm going to push for a 1 seed in my playoffs. But yeah, man, I mean, I wouldn't feel horrible about it either. I have much tougher decisions, as I know many of the people watching this have, to make this week than whether or not to plug him into my lineup, particularly if you have a flex spot. So you're theoretically choosing 3 running backs for your roster.
Mitch, I know that it's a long way from now until the Sunday night game in the DFS world, but your first blush, who's most likely to be your captain tonight in the showdowns, the Bears-Packer game?
Oh, I like how you phrase that. Yeah, I was actually just looking at this for the first time as you had asked me. So Devontae Adams, clear cut, wide receiver, just racks up receptions, has touchdown equity for days. And, you want to put those wide receivers in there at the captain spot. I believe they've won like 76% of showdowns this year on DraftKings. So wide receivers are clutch over there on DraftKings. FanDuel's a little bit different. It's running backs, it's quarterbacks. It's the touchdown equity that rules the day on FanDuel. A little bit less percentage winning those tournaments on showdowns on FanDuel this year, but still has been a higher probability. And DFS is a game of probabilities. For me, it's going to be Devontae Adams. If Scantling is out, it's going to be Lazard. He had 60%. He had run 60% of the snaps this past week 11 in his first game back, and I think that likely increases, especially if this is another week removed. And now if there's no MVS, I'd be intrigued to see who picks up his snaps, though. If it's going to be Darius Shepard or Equanimus St. Brown. I haven't even seen him play. Robert Tonyan, though, is really the clear breadwinner for me. We have been tracking him for a while, and we've been watching those snap rates. Snap rate, even though his play has not been up to par as what it was in the beginning of the year, we knew there was going to be some type of precipitous drop-off because he had like 4 or 5 touchdowns in his first 20 targets. No one keeps that rate. And he's looked better as of late, and he looks healthy, and he's had over 60% of the snaps over the last 4 weeks. And I think that he's probably going to be the number 2 pass catching option. Maybe even Jamal Williams. They find ways to get him the football a few more times tonight. So maybe he's one of those very cheap showdown options that you could turn to. Those are my hot takes off of 90 seconds of research, though. I would likely want to put a little bit more time investment into that before you take too much stock in those things.
Of course. Gene and Tunyon looking good to play tonight?
Yeah, nothing changing from his injury report over the past couple of weeks. He's good to go.
All right, Woodrow, let's get to in a typical week, Jason, Jalen Hurts getting first team snaps, and the report that Jalen Hurts is going to see some action without Carson Wentz on the field would be this a massive, massive story. But this is week 12 in 2020 NFL. But still, you've got to make decisions about these guys in the Eagles offense. And this is also, I want to give you the floor just to go whatever direction you want with this very interesting development, perhaps foreseeable. And I don't know how foreseeable it was, say, like 3 or 4 months before the season, but certainly in the last 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, if we roll back the tape and watch the archives, I think like week 4 or 5, maybe, I told you I was apoplectic and you're a bit surprised by the vehemence of my reaction. And I just think this is kind of playing out that way. I mean, I'm not a fan of making injury excuses in the NFL because every team gets impacted in some way. Certainly, objectively, though, I can't say that the Eagles haven't been devastated. And Lane Johnson, who's probably the toughest guy on the team, finally had to call it a season. So I'm not going to say that Wentz has been dealt a full or fair deck per se, but I mean, if you watch the games, and I've watched every snap, as I'm sure most Eagles fans have, he's regressed meaningfully. Or put it another way, that MVP caliber start to the season that he got hurt a few years ago maybe was an outlier. But either way, he makes bad decisions consistently. And we're now in this purgatory situation potentially where we've signed him to a massive extension already, and like probably 8 to 10 other NFL teams, we now have a quarterback that's certainly good enough that lots of fans on other teams say, "Oh, give me Carson Wentz." And we have a financial commitment to him. But I think if you watch him every week, you really have doubts, absent an absolutely dominant defense and supporting cast, that he can win a Super Bowl. Now that said, my reticence here to your question is that I'm not at all sold on Jalen Hurts as an NFL full-time starter either. I know that we've seen an absolute incredible list of quarterbacks coming out of college of late. These I think we're now seeing that the athletic, mobile quarterback who can also throw is probably the new prototype. But I need to see more from Jalen Hurts, and again, I know we only have an hour here, so I won't get into it, but if you watch Jalen Hurts when he transferred, he wasn't as good as the quarterbacks that played before him. Right. I mean, in that same system, he was statistically quite impressive, but he wasn't the same quarterback. And I don't know that his mental processor works in the same way that a Kyler Murray's does. Yeah. So I just need to see it first. Now, I guess long-winded answer to your question, I have no problem with them working in Jalen Hurts now. I understand the Eagles are technically still in first place, and if we win this week, we'll stay in first place. But I mean, come on, right? I mean, whoever comes out of the NFC East is not going to the Super Bowl. So I'm fine with the team thinking longer term here, saying let's just see if Hurts is someone we can consider competing for the job, and if not, then I'm all for tearing it all up and going for something new next year, whether that be trading Wentz or using a high draft pick but keeping Wentz and making him compete for the job. I think that is the prudent way to do it. The NFL has shown you need to get your quarterback right, and then all other things fall into place, right? So, I feel better. I would feel better at being a Chargers fan right now than being an Eagles fan, even though, yes, I understand the Eagles just won the Super Bowl, and some people must think I'm sounding crazy, but it's all about the future. And do you feel like you have that position taken care of before you have to commit $150 to $200 million to that position? So, yeah, I'm all for. I hope Hurts. I hope they're. You see these reports. I hope Hurts actually plays a significant number of snaps against what should be a very favorable matchup, right? I mean, the Seahawks' pass defense is atrocious. So, if there's ever a time to see if Hurts has got something, and I hope they don't plug and play him like one play per set of downs. I mean, give him a few drives, right? I mean, give him a quarter, give him every third drive, but give him a chance to get into a rhythm.
Yes, I think you hit on a couple of key things, folks, when we see Hurts tomorrow night. It is processor speed. It's his ability to make decisions in the rhythm of the NFL that I have the biggest questions about. But absolutely, I think it's credible that he is going to play enough that Carson Wentz doesn't look like a good play. Carson Wentz is down there in that Brandon Allen or whoever else zone. And Gene, Chris Carson, on the other hand, unlike a Mostert, unlike an Ekeler, do we have any questions about Chris Carson's quality of play and his workload tomorrow night?
I don't know if I have questions about the quality of his play. Brian Schottenheimer had a ton of good things to say, said he looked as quick as always, didn't seem to have too much concern. They've given him plenty of time to come back based on what they said the initial timeline might be, where he was expected to have a chance to play within a week or two, and it's been about a month. So, but yes, I have concerns about his workload. Carlos Hyde looked good last week. Although Pete Carroll said that Carson brings an element of consistency to the offense they haven't had for a while, Carlos Hyde looked good last week. He's relatively healthy as well. I don't think we're going to see the same 60-40 split in Carson's favor that we saw earlier this year. It's possible, but I think this is probably flipped in Hyde's favor for now, unless Carson really shows that he's ready to go. But I don't anticipate that happening in his first week back.
Okay, Mitch. Last week it was put Taysom Hill in at tight end. Don't question it. I think it was FanDuel, right? You'll have to educate us a little bit on where Kendall Hinton or Royce Freeman are in terms of pricing or eligibility. I mean, Freeman's a running back. We know that. And also, I would have guessed that every team right now is looking at their practice squad and saying, do you have any quarterback experience? When did you play quarterback in high school? Jacoby Myers played quarterback in high school. He could play some quarterback. So, Mitch, what do we think about Kendall Hinton? Is it even possible to have him as that DFS cheat code this week?
No, we don't have any cheat codes this week, and I'm happy about that, to be honest. Now, Hinton is not even really on my radar this week. I think, what kind of upside are we looking at? And if he does have a tremendous upside, which I don't believe he does, what's the probability of him hitting it? He's facing one of the best defenses in the NFL, and they are on fire. They are putting in tremendous amount of pressure on opposing quarterbacks right now. I think they've had 3 or 4 games over the last 5 where they've had 5+ sacks. And I think he's in absolute trouble today. I think on the flip side, you have a team like the Saints as near a mortal lock in cash games for sure on both DraftKings and FanDuel. FanDuel defenses are often flat payouts, or excuse me, flat pricing, and at 4.8K FanDuel price tag for the Saints, it's hard to not start your lineup there. And on DraftKings at $3,800, phenomenal play over there as well. My actual issue with playing them in tournaments today, and this is going to be a very unpopular opinion here, is I'm not entirely sure that the Broncos don't just go 35 carries today, try to, shoot, just run the clock out and protect Hinton, protect the entire game and whatever. They just keep everybody healthy if they can. And they don't give him enough pass opportunities for the Saints to apply that pressure, accumulate those sacks, get a pick six, strip sack, things like that. And if they throw the ball 15, 18 times and they're all dink and dunk, and maybe he absorbs a few sacks and a pick, you're not going to be happy with that type of production from your defense when there's going to be other teams out there like the Giants who are very cheap, maybe even the Broncos on the other side, very cheap at 2.2K on DraftKings, who have the opportunity for 3-4 sacks just the same, and maybe a pick six, maybe a strip sack, things like that, where they'll be higher upside plays because the opposing quarterback might throw the ball a few more times.
So Woodrow, with that in mind, that picture that Mitch painted, how cute do we get with Taysom Hill in our lineups today at quarterback, a legit quarterback, and one that was a strong quarterback one last week?
Well, let me just first acknowledge that I heard you all week, Sig, on your various appearances in podcasts and radio spots, sort of mocking how dismissive much of the NFL analyst community was of Taysom Hill. And certainly I was part of that. So I'll take my comeuppance from you and eat some crow.
I like to see the Mormon.
It's fair. It's fair. I mean, we do that roundtable every week, and I know along with Matt Waldman, we're very, very dismissive of him. I really thought it was going to be a debacle. So color me incorrect. I mean, I think the thing that was most impressive was his passing efficiency, right? I mean, he didn't make any wild throws, but 18 of 23, I think it was. Mm-hmm. That's impressive any way you slice it, right? So, I think he's an okay start this week. I think the Broncos are a good defense. It's just the trouble I'm having is what Mitch alluded is I can't even begin to figure out what this game script is going to look like. If the teams really do care about their players first and foremost, I'm with Mitch that Denver pretty much is like, all right, guys, we have to go and play it. The NFL's making us. Let's just get out of there healthy. That's what should happen, right? I mean, because and I know stranger things happen, but it's hard for me to see how Royce Freeman or Kendall Hinton or both will be able to sort of shock and all the Saints defense. I just think it's going to be a debacle whether they try or they don't try. And so with that, does Taysom Hill going to have to do much? I just don't know. So I'm fine with Taysom Hill, but he's a low-end QB1 and not one that I'd be looking to start necessarily. But sure, if you're choosing between him or Carson Wentz or, I guess Roethlisberger, if given sure, okay, then put him in there. But he's not someone I'm thinking I'd be excited about playing this week because, again, Denver's defense is good, and this could just be a slow, grind-them-out game on both sides.
This is a really good test case for we're going to see this scenario play out. Maybe not Kendall Hinton at quarterback, but as teams are playing out the string and maybe playing without a full deck, does that affect the game scripts and affect the fantasy output on the other side? Something to watch here. Gene, real quick, going to Miami. Are you convinced that Tua Tagovailoa is actually hurt and that's why Ryan Fitzpatrick is starting, or do you think this is giving the rookie a little bit of cover for being benched?
Both. I don't think we know exactly what's going on with the injury. It sounds like something happened during Wednesday's practice to his throwing thumb. We've seen quarterbacks play through these injuries before, Matthew Stafford most recently. We're not sure what the situation is, but if there's swelling and grip strength issues and you've got a backup like Ryan Fitzpatrick ready to go, then you play him. And I think there's lots of different reasons to do that. Whether or not you feel Tua is the quarterback of the future or not, the Dolphins are still playing for a playoff spot. And if Tua is not fully healthy and Fitzpatrick is, I think that's an easy way to go.
So Mitch, I'm an emotional fantasy player, and I was an emotional DFS player sometimes too. For me, football's more fun, fantasy football's more fun if Ryan Fitzpatrick is somehow involved. So what do you think about him divorced from emotion as a play this week with no Myles Gaskin, not activated. So we're looking at a DeAndre Washington, Matt Breida, Patrick Laird backfield. Does it make you more interested in Devontae Parker or Mike Gesicki in this game against the Jets?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's hard not to like the beard. Listen, I'm a huge Bills fan. I feel like Fitzpatrick had the most, I believe he actually did. He played his most seasons of his career, definitely the most prominent, era of his career in Buffalo. And it's hard not to root for the guy everywhere he goes. And I'm going to be rooting for him again today, but I'm not touching him in DFS. I will take his past targets, though. I like Devontae Parker. I like Gesicki. We saw Gesicki score 2 touchdowns the first 6 games with Fitzpatrick, and he had 1 game over 100 yards receiving. I think the last game with Ryan, he had 5 receptions for 91 yards off the top of my head. Parker had a couple nice big games in there as well. Clearly showed that they are able to carry you in DFS and probably fantasy as well this week, especially Gesicki at a barren wasteland of a tight end position. And I think that there's an opportunity to use them, not use Fitzpatrick, because you might not have to. I think there's other quarterbacks on the slate for DFS that just offer such immense upside. I don't want to give up the opportunity for saving that type of money. I don't think you need to save the salary. I think there's plenty of value all over the industry where, paying down at the most important stacking position, the quarterback, which drives the entire upside of your lineup. I don't want to pay down there. It's guys like Josh Allen I'm paying up for because I think the upside of the stack is what's going to win me my tournament, not Fitzpatrick throwing for 260 yards and 2 scores.
Okay, Jason, follow me on this picture. All right.
I'm ready.
The Colts coaches are Lucy. The football is Nyheim Hines fantasy value, and we are Charlie Brown. Do we take a run at that ball and kick it? Or do we say, not this time? No.
No, you have to. Taylor's out, obviously, with COVID-19. 7-3 Colts versus 7-3 Titans. One of the few games this week that seemingly is both intact from both teams can do what they would intend to do otherwise, and has a lot of stakes, and probably a game of the week. I mean, at least in terms of significance to the playoff run, I'm excited by it. It's probably the game I'm most interested in outside of my own deplorable Eagles playing the Seahawks. Listen, if not now, when, right? Like Frank Reich's a good coach. They're good. Like they're well. I know we make jokes about rational coaching, but the Colts are I think a well coached team, right? I mean, they've had some pretty good success post this Andrew Luck suddenly retiring, and Phillip Rivers is still the same Phillip Rivers that we were all making fun of in the Chargers the last few years. He's still not a very good quarterback at this age, but they're playing well and they're in contention, and that defense is amazing. So yeah, why not, man? Like, I mean, what you're really asking me is, do I have confidence that they're going to play Nyheim Hines more snaps than Jordan Wilkins? And they damn sure better. I mean, right? Like they should, right? I mean, and with their outside receivers being what they are, and Rivers not really being great at throwing to outside receivers now, I'm excited about Nyheim Hines this week. I'm excited about Michael Pittman. Like I'd be more apt to play Michael Pittman than T.Y. Hilton. I mean, I just think those are the two guys. Get excited, let them ball out, right? Let the Titans ball out with their usual suspects, who I think are all great plays this week, even though they have a tough matchup just because it is a division rivalry. And then let them. I want to see punch for punch, man. I want to see a battle out there, and I want to see Nyheim Hines get 8 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown, and then maybe another 30, 40 rushing yards. Who knows? But I think he's a fine start.
So, Mitch, Woodrow did a good job laying out why Indy, Tennessee is one of the games of the day. If it's the most exciting game in its time slot, I think the Kansas City Tampa game is a late game. I could be wrong about that, but my brain, I'm only 98% sure about anything. But from a fantasy standpoint, it is maybe the most exciting game in terms of output. I don't know where the Vegas over-unders are right now, but there's lots of angles to this game, and it's not entirely clear which ones are the veins of gold for DFS. Or who are you zeroing in on in this matchup?
All right, so there are a few targets I like, and Michael Pittman's one of them. It's hard not to like him right now. He's at an increased snap rate over the last 3 weeks of 87%, 81%, and 80%. Now, anytime you get that type of talent on the field, I want to play him in any format, showdown, afternoon slate, if you're playing the main slate, whatever it might be. I believe they might be a 1 o'clock game, so an early slate. Michael Pittman Jr. has touchdowns in back-to-back games, and he's being targeted as well. He's grabbed, let me see here. We have 4, 8, and 3 targets, so not terrible. 13.19% market share, could be better. But again, it's not like there's any one wide receiver that trumps him in this offense right now. We're seeing Rivers pretty much do what we thought he would do when he got here: spread the ball around, dink and dunk his way down the field, put a pass 30 yards downfield every once in a while. He did throw a very, very nice 30-yard pass over the shoulder left sideline. I can't remember who it was last week. I was shocked about that one. So he's kind of in that breeze mode right now, right? Where he's just, banking on accuracy and precision down the field. And your take has to be, do you think Michael Pittman can accrue enough value with that type of offense? I think inherently you need a touchdown for him to pay off his price tag. You can say that about everyone on that Colts team right now at their current prices. And personally, the only guy I think can do that is Pittman. So he's the only one I'm targeting on Indy. On the other side, I like A.J. Brown. I like Jonnu Smith. I like Derrick Henry. I know that the Colts defense has been phenomenal this year, but those guys have such touchdown equity. We look at this every once in a while about market share on opposing offenses or on an offense. Basically, if you're able to project the Titans offense is going to score 100 fantasy points, well, those 3 guys often accrue about 60 to 70% of all fantasy points for the team. They are just targeted focus on that offense. You got Derrick Henry getting the lion's share of the carries, Jonnu Smith and A.J. Brown literally scoring all the touchdowns this year. Corey Davis, really the only other option you can target there, but he's one of those guys I only want to use in game stacks.
Okay, and thank you for that. For the Pittman, I've gotten a lot of Michael Pittman questions. Most questions that involve Michael Pittman, or I've said Pittman. As we go down to the wire, what about the Chiefs-Bucks game? Because I do think this is going to be the highest scoring game of the week. Mitch, is there one player or players from either side that stand out to you?
Can I say all of them? I mean,
yeah, right.
Yeah, this is one of those games. I remember 4 or 5 weeks ago we were talking about this, and you asked me, "What do I do with the Cowboys?" And I said, "Just play them all. Just play them all." It's going to be one of those games where it's going to be high scoring no matter what. And if that means it's 38-28 and it's not the most competitive game, who cares? You're still looking at a lot of fantasy points. Listen, we went back through the first 9 weeks of one of these DraftKings tournaments, and we found that 42% of all Mahomes' top 1% finishes. Basically, anytime that Mahomes went absolutely nuclear this season, there's been a specific stack. It was using Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelce. 42% of the time, whenever he has these astronomical scores and finishes in the top 1% of a tournament, that was the stack. So for me, someone who focuses on probabilities of doing well in DFS, I'm focusing on that. It's not Watkins, it's not Hardman, it's not Robinson. I'm not touching Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Le'Veon Bell. It's that specific 3-player stack. Now, on the other side, I think you can run it back with any one of those pass-catching options. Chris Godwin is going to be potentially the highest ceiling of all 3. Antonio Brown had 8 targets 2 weeks ago, 13 last week. He's due for a big game if he's going to get 13 targets against the Chiefs. And, of course, Mike Evans has the touchdown equity. So go ahead, throw a dart, whichever one you land on. I'll say, yes, that's a great lineup.
And we have a lot of huge implications in these games, as Woodrow laid out, as we have Kansas City and Tampa, all kinds of great reality show. It's a shame in some ways that COVID this week has overshadowed like the Bruce Arians, Tom Brady story and some of the other great stories around the league, but those are still there. We are still hitting on all of that. Again, Mitch Carl, DFS and Donuts, rise or fall for all your DFS needs. OFBG Jason Wood from Football Guys and Dr. Jene Bramel. You get all of his information and breakdown as you're doing an incredible job. I mean, I know you're also doing an incredible job for your community, Gene, but I know this was not part of the job description. Whenever you decided, hey, I've got some opinions about injuries, I've learned some stuff. So thank you as always for taking whatever comes along and doing the best you can to help us navigate through it. What we can navigate through today, folks, hopefully is a slate of games that relieve some of our pressures, distract us, and it's still time spent together, and we always enjoy that. Here at Football Guys, we appreciate that you make us part of your life. We like being part of your life and having you be part of our lives here and having the NFL, at least for another week. We will enjoy it, savor it, as always.